Hello, welcome back to the channel. It is Dan Nocturne Knives coming at you today with a review of this knife, the Benchmade Shootout. This one is coming in from the Apex Passing Around group. Very big thanks to those guys. And I've had it with me for a bit over a week, and I've been actually really enjoying my time with it. I'm excited to share some thoughts about it and give you guys some of my impressions of this knife. So with that said, let's jump into it. Take a look first at some measurements. Overall length is coming in at just under 8.5 inches if you include this glass breaker thing, more like 8.25 if you don't. Blade length is coming in right at about 3.5 inches with cutting edge just shy of that, maybe 3.4, 3. It's pretty much 3.5 actually. It's incredibly close. Get some caliper measurements here. Handle thickness coming in at about 0.5, pretty average. I'll get handle width, I suppose, coming in at about 1.2. Blade stock thickness is coming in at about 0.09. Very nice and thin. That's the thinnest OTF stock I've ever seen personally. Cutting edge thickness. Behind the edge, we're coming in at about 13 thousandths. Now that is incredible. That's amazing to see on an OTF. Measure a bit higher up on the blade. Yep, 12.5 thousandths. Take a look up in the tanto section. Gets thicker up here, coming in about 26 thousandths, 25 thousandths through that tanto section. It changes throughout. Thinner back here, thicker up here towards the tip. You can see that tip getting thick. Decently robust tip considering the thin stock. So that's pretty awesome. The thinness of this is very impressive for any knife, but especially for an OTF. Now materials we're looking at here, the handle is, I think they're calling it Grivery. It's an injection molded plastic similar to FRN, anything, stuff like that. On the blade, you have CPM crew wear for the steel, and it has this kind of flat dark earth Cerakote, I believe. Got a deep carry loop over wire or metal pocket clip. This one is stainless steel, and then you have a silly glass breaker on the end of it. And this one is left and right hand positionable, and this switch is totally ambidextrous. So it's going to be exactly the same experience for righties and lefties. Do some size comparisons. Got the classic Para 3 PM2 combo here. It's coming in very close to the PM2. It's pretty much PM2 length. Looking at thickness, it's going to be a little bit thicker than your PM2 that way. This way, it's coming close, but a little bit more narrow in the pocket. If you take into account the switch, it's getting pretty comparable. A few budget pieces here. You have the QSP Penguin and the CRJB Centros. Here's another long but lightweight knife, the Spyderco Native Chief. A couple front flippers in a similar size range, TW Price Dawn and Sharp by Design Mini Tempest. Here's a Vero Engineering Mini Impulse and a Sharp by Design Apex. And I think that'll do it for size comparisons. Let's jump into some of my thoughts about this one. So I'll start off with likes. First of my likes are going to be the ergonomics. They're quite solid on this. It has some nice, thoughtful contouring to it. All these edges are nice and rounded. You can see big chamfers here. There's some jimping, some subtle jimping here, but it's not sharp. It's very subtle. It doesn't dig into your hand, but it does give you a little bit of extra traction. And you drop into a hammer grip here, and it really... your hand really just wraps around this in a very nice way. No sharp edges. There's no gap. Like in a normal knife, you have this gap here where the blade falls into, and as you're cutting things, your hand can kind of dig into that gap, and it gets a little uncomfortable. On this knife, you don't have any of that. It's a nice solid surface. It's kind of fixed blade-like in that quality. My next like is the blade shape on this. I've been really into a nice tanto lately, and this one is a really cool one. I like the gentle curve on the tanto here. It's still got a decently prominent transition, and it's well proportioned. I'm a fan of this blade shape. There's a lot of utility here because you can use this secondary tip to open packages, to cut things on a surface without having to come all the way up here to the main tip. And then this portion is good for push cuts, scraping, things like that. And you have a nice straight section here. My next like is the weight on this. It is very lightweight, like super light. It feels really feathery in your hand. I don't remember exactly what it is, but I'll post it up top and left, and hopefully I already did when I was doing specs. We'll see if I remember that. But you drop it in your pocket, and with the weight being so light, it really carries pretty well, despite it being fairly large in the pocket. It's kind of thick. It's fairly wide this way. But with the lightweight, it's not so bad in pocket. Next are these grip patches here. They seem like they might be a little gimmicky, but they really actually work. Put the blade out, and a pinch grip here, you feel locked in, like really locked in here on the pinch grip. Put your thumb here, thumb like that. It's real meaningful traction, and it doesn't get in the way when you're putting it in and out of your pocket because it's so far away from the pocket clip. It doesn't interfere with that. My next is US made. Always like to support some hometown manufacturing when I can. Nothing against a foreign made knife, but it's nice to support a knife made where you're from. Then my next is the action and the spring tension on this. I think it's really almost perfect. A lot of OTFs I find have too strong a spring, so it's really actually very difficult to deploy and retract the blade. This one, the spring is much lighter without being so light that it feels cheap or it has a chance of failing or it might come open accidentally. It absolutely won't do that. You can see there's a lot of tension on this button, but it's a very smooth push. It's a very even push. And it's easy. It's really not difficult at all to do. I could do this for a decent while and not get tired. And with most OTFs, it's legitimately difficult to deploy it. And granted, I've never owned an OTF. I don't have that muscle, that specific muscle built up. But my fingers and thumb are decently strong from manipulating knives and dexterous like that. And most OTFs really are difficult to deploy. This one is not, though. It's, in my opinion, a perfect tension. You can even take your index finger and retract it. I can't quite deploy it like that, but I can detract it, and I think that's saying something. I think that's very nice. So it's easy to use while still being safe and I think reliable. I haven't had a single misfire with this in the many cycles that I've put it through. And now my biggest is going to be this blade. My biggest by far. This blade is phenomenal. It's really incredibly well done. You can see, as I mentioned, the shape, I really like it. The stock is thin, coming in well under 1/8 of an inch at 0.09 approximately. Super thin stock. So very thin stock to start with. And then the grind on this is aggressive. It gets thin behind the edge, coming in 12, 13 thousandths behind the edge for any knife is wonderful. One of my few other knives that's actually that thin, at least from factory, is this TW Price Dawn, coming in about 11 thousandths behind the edge. Love it. I think that's awesome. And this is in that same league, and that's one of my favorite slicing knives. I think it has one of the best factory grinds ever that I've experienced, and this one is rivaling it. And that's really special that they've done that in an OTF package, where normally blade stocks are really thick, grinds are thick and short. This one has that nice long, it's almost a full flat grind. You can see just barely that flat right there. But it's a really high grind and really thin. I'll see if I can show that off. There, you can see just how thin that is. Very impressive, and it cuts really well because of it. I put this through cardboard, and it goes through there like butter, like a dream. It's awesome to cut with and use. So this blade really is phenomenal, and I think that's the selling point of this knife, is this astoundingly good blade. I really can't say enough good things about this blade. It's incredibly well done. Absolutely, by far and away, the best done OTF blade that I've ever personally seen or experienced or know of. And just a phenomenal blade. all around if you want to actually cut things. And with that Crewware steel, it's still going to be tough enough. It's thick enough that I think you could treat this blade fairly harshly and it will do just fine. Now, talk about some neutrals. My first neutral is the carrier profile of this. It is undoubtedly a little bit thick and a little bit wide in pocket. Now, this is only neutral because you do gain things from that. You gain ergonomics from that sacrifice in carryability. So it fills your hand really well. It's nice and contoured. Now with that comes that extra size in pocket, which isn't quite as nice, but I can live with it for the ergonomic benefits. So really, I think it's an okay trade-off if you don't mind the size in pocket. Again, you're rivaling a PM2 in terms of pocket profile. You can see that, especially with the button here. You're coming in very close to the same width overall and a little bit thicker this way. And that's my only neutral. Now let's move on to some dislikes, and I do have a couple of dislikes. So my first dislike is the handle material. It's made of plastic. Now, if you like plastic handles, if you don't mind a plastic handle, that's probably not going to be an issue for you. But for me, personally, I'm not a fan of plastic handles. I hate, hear that? I really am not a fan of that. Just that plasticky tap, the rattling, even the button is made of plastic. It's not my jam, not my thing. If you like it, great. You're probably gonna like this knife a lot. I'm not a fan of the plastic. I wish it was G10, aluminum, something like that. For me personally, the knife would be improved like that. Yes, you'll gain some weight, gain an ounce or two. The trade-off for me is worth it. Then my next dislike is this knife has a rattling sound. Hopefully you'll be able to hear that. If you hear, it's a little click when you shake it, and you'll also hear it when you tap it like that. I think it's just a spring or something, maybe the blade rattling around slightly, and that annoys me. I don't love that rattly sound. I'm not sure if that's a feature of most OTFs. I haven't handled enough OTFs for long enough to know if most of them rattle or most of them don't, but I'm not a fan of the rattle. If it's a normal OTF thing, okay, you can take this off the list, but if it's not, then yeah, I'm not a fan of that. It's a little thing, but I don't like it. Next dislike is the prominence of the button here. The slider, whatever you want to call it. It's not bad for most grips. You see in a hammer grip, pretty good. You come in here and it lands in front of your hand. For a saber grip, put your thumb up here. You could even use it in a saber grip like this. Kind of put your thumb here if you want to. But in a pinch grip, where I really want to pinch up on this, it totally gets in the way. Your pinch grip is kind of ruined by this slider. And yes, I know that's just kind of a feature of most OTF knives. That's one reason I really like a side actuated OTF, or this side switch, like the Hawk Deadlock, for example, or the Benchmade Infidel, because you can do a pinch grip and you don't have that digging into your hand. Is that a deal breaker? No, you can do a pinch grip farther back. You can, extend over it in your saber grip. But I think it's a little bit annoying. If this were shorter, it might work better for a pinch grip, but then it might not be as easy to actuate. I don't know. It does get in the way in this grip, and I'm not a huge fan of that because I really do like this pinch grip. And then my biggest dislike is this, the glass breaker. It's stupid. I hate glass breakers on knives. No one who needs a glass breaker is actually going to use the glass breaker on their knives. They're going to get a dedicated tool for it. Stop putting glass breakers on the end of knives. It doesn't work. Every time you go and put this thing in your pocket, you're going to push down and you're going to stab this glass breaker into your hand. You're going to push it into your pocket and stab your hand with it. And it's really, really annoying. And when you go to get something in your pocket, you're going to brush up against it and be stabbing it into your hand. Not a fan of the glass breaker. Really don't appreciate it being here. So that's my biggest like. Take the glass breaker off. It was silly on the bailout, and it's silly on the shootout too. It's just how it is. And those are all my dislikes. Really not that many and not too serious. So now let's move into some conclusions. This knife, Benchmade Shootout, I actually like it a lot. This is a very well done knife in almost all respects. The ergonomics are good in most grips, a little bit of issue in your pinch grip, but you can get around it. I could live with that. The glass breaker is very annoying, and I'm not a fan of the plasticiness and the rattling, but if that isn't a peeve of yours, if that isn't a turnoff for you, you're probably going to love this knife because of the good, which is everything to do with this blade. The blade is phenomenal. Incredibly thin. One of the thinner blades and grinds I've seen on a production knife ever, just period. And it's on an OTF. And that combination is just, it's incredible. I think Benchmade has done something really special and unique with this blade, and I'm really impressed by it. If you're someone who values a cutting tool, a knife for cutting things, for slicing, for efficient, high-quality cutting, this is actually a really good pick in an OTF package. So that's really the draw of this knife, is a fairly easily carryable and slicing OTF. Massive fan of that. I have sharpened this one, by the way. It came with a not so great edge. It really wasn't terrible, not Benchmade's worst work by far, but I went ahead and put one of my edges on it. I asked the owner, and he gave me permission. I used my new resin bonded diamond stone, my new Veneve. I used my new Veneve resin bonded diamond stone to do this sharpening. It's 240, f240/f400, two-sided. Wanted to try it out, and a side note, that stone is phenomenal. New favorite stone, I think. I left this one at that f400 finish, which is a nice, moderate finish. It's about 800-900, maybe a K on 1,000 on some scales. And I think it's a really good balance of aggression and refinement. It's got some grit, it's got some bite, but it's still refined, so it doesn't feel like you're taking a hacksaw to whatever you're cutting through. And this edge just came out wonderfully. I did it at about 17 degrees, which was matching factory, and you can see just how thin the bevel is as evidence of how thin this grind is. And that's everything I want to say about this knife. I think I'm a really big fan of it. I think if you want an OTF that will cut, this is the best on the market that I've seen, period. Now, I don't have a bunch of experience with OTFs, but I know that most of them are coming in thick, in stock, and grind. This one is a whole different world. And I think if you like OTFs and cutting tools, this is going to be a really, really good knife for you. So I would wholeheartedly recommend this. I really like it, and it's kind of made me want one just because this blade is so phenomenal. If you have a Benchmade Shootout, if you have any thoughts about it, you've been looking at picking one up, go drop a comment down below. Let me know what you think about it, what you thought of this video, any questions, anything like that. I would love to hear it. While you're down there, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe button if you like sharpening, knife content, all that kind of stuff. And with all that said, thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you on the next one.